A force in the universe has been driving us since the beginning of our time. The pull of a better future is a gift that can bring us everything we need and want. What evolves humans is the ability to pass on to the next generation skills and knowledge to make life better. It's in our DNA. Skills passed down from fathers to sons, mothers to daughters, families to children, grandparents to the generations that follow them. That driving force to improve was defined by one of Napoleon Hill's contemporaries, W. Clement Stone. Stone called the need for humans to improve divine discontent. Discontent has been the challenge for all humans since people lived in caves. At one time, the cave itself was an improvement. The desire to create a better life for those who follow began here. Our journey to improve continues, and the opportunities for exceptionalism are greater than any other time in history. What secrets have been handed down in the many teachings of Napoleon Hill over time to create a better life from generation to generation? Think and Grow Rich is just one of the many books authored by Napoleon Hill. There are hundreds of speeches, articles, and many books co-authored by Hill that reveal even more secrets.
If you work for a salary or wages, you have a marvelous opportunity to promote yourself into a higher income and a more responsible position by forming a mastermind alliance with your associate workers, including the management.
Secrets that have made many wealthy. Another success story is about W. Clement Stone. As a young man, Stone discovered Napoleon Hill's systems for becoming wealthy. Stone had already led a life of overcoming great odds to become successful. Chicago was much like the rest of America in 1900. The skyline we know today was only an idea. Everything we know started as an idea. Something was about to change. In 1900, the new 20th century was the dawn of an era of invention, prosperity, and wealth. Discontent was abundant on May 4th, 1902 in Chicago when W. Clement Stone was born. His father died in 1905 when W. Clement Stone was just 3 years old, so his mother found work as a dressmaker.
I was born in poverty. My father died when I was very young. My mother was a seamstress working for the finest dressmaking establishment in Chicago in those days. Now, everyone who really does something great in life must make a sacrifice. In her case, the sacrifice was to save her money to achieve her goal to have her own dressmaking establishment. Now, at that time, at age 6, I wanted to earn some money by selling newspapers because I didn't want to ask my mother for it. Now, in those days, the papers were not on consignment. One had to pay in advance a deposit. So I borrowed the money from a friend, went down to 61st and Cottage Grove. 2 teenagers were yelling out the news, and I stood beside them and yelled out what I thought they said as loudly as I could. And they immediately yelled, "Get the hell out of here!" And I refused. So they beat me up. Cottage Grove was a very busy thoroughfare. It had a streetcar line, and the stores were very prosperous. People from many parts of Chicago would come to some of these fine stores. But I started walking north and saw at Helle's Restaurant, H-O-E-L-L-E, German name, a large number of people, and I walked in and sold a few papers, and Mr. Helle kindly pushed me out the door. I figured, well, that's better than being beaten up, so I go in again and sell some more papers, and Mr. Helle this time pushed me hard and fast out the door. Next day I came back with twice as many papers.
Determination paid off. By the time Stone was 13, he owned his own newsstand. Years later, he discovered a secret to turn his hard work into millions. He read one of Napoleon Hill's best-selling books, and that motivated him to parlay $100 he'd saved into millions with a strong desire to succeed. And by putting together the principles from Napoleon Hill, he was the living example of the rags to riches protagonists in Horatio Alger's stories that he loved so much. Many who made it to the top start young. The skills handed down are being applied today by many successful young entrepreneurs worldwide. Some are lucky to begin young, but it's never too late to become successful. Such is the case for a World War II ace fighter pilot. When Og Mandino returned home to the States, his skills in the cockpit didn't translate very well to transition to a successful civilian life. And like he'd done for so many others, W. Clement Stone became an angel to Og Mandino. Mandino was an alcoholic at the time, whom Stone took under his wing. Og Mandino told his story worldwide about a cold winter in Chicago. On a lonely night in freezing snow, his discontent led him to the only free place that was warm inside, the public library. That day, he chose a book in the library in Chicago instead of a gun in a pawn shop.
There are so many out there who might have reached the same position I did years ago when I came very close one morning at the age of 35 to buying a gun in a pawn shop that I saw in a pawn shop window and blowing my brains out. I had lost my family, my daughter, my wife, my home, my job, and I was a drunk. I was laying in gutters, Joe. I'm not ashamed to admit it now, because I figured the only way I could help anybody else is that they must understand where I'm coming from.
The book by Napoleon Hill led Og Mandino to a lifelong relationship with W. Clement Stone. Mandino became the publisher of Success magazine. That position led to the publishing of a bestseller based on the principles handed down.
We came up one article short, and I went home and stayed up all night, and I wrote a piece about Ben Hogan and how Ben came back from that terrible automobile accident he had when they told him he'd never walk again. Ben not only walked again, God love him, he won the National Open again. And I ran the piece in my magazine, my little magazine, Success Unlimited. And this is how, Joe, I'm convinced that God plays chess with all of us in our lives. He makes a move, and then he leans back and says, now it's your move, Joe. You can make it or not make it. In my case, that magazine came out with my article about Ben Hogan. It was the first article I had written for the magazine, although I'd been editing it for a year. I had too much to do just putting that baby together each month. And what happened is that a New York publisher got a toothache and went out to his dentist in Long Island, and he's sitting in the waiting room waiting to go in to be worked on, and he picks up off the coffee table in the waiting room my little magazine, Success Unlimited. And he's a golf nut, and he flipped through the magazine, found my article on Ben Hogan, read it, and when he got into his office that afternoon, he wrote me a letter, and I still have the letter, Joe, which says, you've got talent. If you ever decide to write a book, please get in touch with me. And about 2 years later, a tiny little book came out called The Greatest Salesman in the World. It is now past, well, we're getting close to 14 million copies, Joe, in 18 languages, and it just, they tell me it continues to sell in paperbacks at the rate of 100,000 copies a month, and that's 25 years. That's quite a record.
W. Clement Stone once stated, regardless of what you are or what you have been, you can still become what you want to be. Lessons from Andrew Carnegie that inspired Napoleon Hill continued to drive W. Clement Stone throughout his life. Stone eventually teamed up with Napoleon Hill to co-write Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. Stone, Hill, Mandino, and others were not the first to discover that universe holds special secrets to success. Special moments are coming to you. These moments are not ordinary. They are destiny-altering moments designed to thrust you years ahead. It was written several thousand years ago in Ecclesiastes that time and chance come together for every person. The truth is, as emphasized by Napoleon Hill, it doesn't matter what happened to you in the past. You can still achieve what you want. Napoleon Hill taught throughout his volumes of work that we have to take responsibility for the experiences handed down to us. The journey from where we have been to where we are all going begins with the correct information and skills. The sharpest skills, the right principles for success.